next we have Dr. Gary Kantor from Insight. Dr. Gary Kantor trained and worked in Canada and the USA before returning to South Africa in 2005. I was in a matric. Fun fact, says he plays squash when he's not injured, plays piano in the chamber music group. He's a big fan of DHL Stormers, ex-world champions of URC, not anymore. Where are Lions, but anyway. And is a father of 2 kids living in New York City. So the Rand exchange must be wonderful for him. And the overview of his topic is AI in healthcare, democratizing or dystopian. It's a great word, Gary, dystopian. So I Googled it. It says adjective relating to or denoting an imagined state or society where there is great suffering or injustice. Put your hands together for Ultrasound. Gary Kantor.
Hi everyone, it's great to be amongst old friends and new. Christoph, thanks for that intro to AI. I just want to let you into a little secret. That is an AI version of Christoph. So it's actually taller, slimmer, and has more hair than the original. That one's for you, Nicole. Where are you? I think it's open season on Christoph today. But they are the leadership, as you said, Siv. So congrats to them for bringing us all together to get to know each other a little more and talk about some interesting things, including AI. So I'm going to take some of those ideas and insights through into our healthcare system. And someone asked me before we started, oh, you're the expert in AI. So we're so early in the trajectory of this that I don't know that anybody, even Sam Altman, is calling himself an expert. So we're at the beginning of a very, very interesting journey for AI in everything. And that's going to be part of my message. So let's see if the clicker works. Okay. Any of you recognize this fine gentleman? His name's Jensen Huang, and he's gazing confidently up into the future, I think, and this is what he's saying, or this is what he's seeing. He says we're at the beginning of a major technological era. Every industry will be revolutionized. So who is he? What does he do? Anybody in the audience recognize Jensen Huang? Same in Cape Town, so not any brighter in Joburg. So Jensen is the founder and CEO of NVIDIA. Does that, the younger folks might recognize, gamers and so on, NVIDIA, graphics cards. Okay, and that number is 1T. Siv, what's 1T? Is that a number? Is that a small number, big number? Very big number. A very big number. 1T is 1 trillion. That is 1,000 billion. And that is the valuation of NVIDIA today. They make GPUs, not CPUs, graphical processing units. And that technology is at the heart of that data center picture that Christoph showed you right at the end. Those data centers are going to be full of GPUs made by this company, NVIDIA, which was started just 23 years ago by 3 friends with $40,000. So maybe that's Insight in 10 years, right? Okay. So you've heard about the technology, a little bit about how it works, and those were great explanations for the sort of both the mystique of it and both the potential of it. So what happens when we put this into healthcare? Who agrees that healthcare systems are stressed? Yeah, hands are going up. So that's our own system and global systems. So this is a really oversimplified view of a healthcare system. Maybe it's everything, maybe it's yours, maybe it's not. On the demand side, where's Brian? Is he here today? Demand, supply, at the back there. So on the demand side, simplified, aging, disease burden, and lots of expectations having to do with new technologies and other things, and diminishing resources that certainly aren't increasing. And on the supply side, this old, but I think useful framework to think about, what the supply system is made of. Technology, and we're talking about a brand new kind of technology today, together with people and processes. That's never going to go away. People, process, technology to drive the outcomes that we want from healthcare for patients. And what's the problem today? The problem is on the outcome side, and the outcomes aren't as good as we would want them to be. And certainly we're seeing enormous amounts of inequity in South Africa and in global healthcare systems across the board. There's part of the outcome story that we're forgetting here, which is the outcomes of people who are in the system on the supply side, the staff, the professionals, the doctors, the nurses, and others. And even before the COVID pandemic, we were seeing huge amounts of burnout of staff. So you throw that into the mix, burnt out staff, that diminishes the capability of the system as a whole to deliver the outcomes that we want. And now we're going to throw AI into this. Is it going to solve the problem? So I think there are some really strong positives that have come from AI. I think that it's clearest when we talk about a category of AI that we could call applied AI or task-based AI, which is actually not the ChatGPT side of the story. Although it's built on the neural networks that Christoph was describing, this is a set of technologies that's been evolving for a number of years. It goes back 10, 20 years. But as I said, I think there's evidence that it's greatly maturing and starting to come into practice. So I'm going to give you 3 examples from my own specialty, anesthesiology. The first is that this is built on lots of data that's been accumulating over the last few years. So you would think a really simple set of data, just blood pressure during anesthetics. And if you collect all of that data, what you start to see is as a practitioner, a surprising amount of low blood pressure, brief periods of time, very common, 70% of anesthetics, but surprisingly and a little alarmingly, periods of low blood pressure going 10 to 15 minutes, still high, around 30%. And that kind of prolonged hypotension, as we call it, is strongly associated with organ injury, something we'd like to avoid. And this is a device now on the market, a commercial device, that predicts hypotension with an index. And it's kind of like a speedometer. We'll read from 0 to 100, and it predicts hypotension occurring a few minutes ahead, giving you, as a practitioner, an opportunity to do something about it. A second example that's a little bit more experimental. I think anesthetists now know, the public now know a little more about what anesthetists do thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were intubating a lot of patients, not me personally. But one of the things we do is put breathing tubes in people so they stay alive during surgery, quite a good thing. And it may surprise you to know that the way we figure out whether someone's likely to be easy or difficult to intubate is really on clinical grounds, looking in the throat, some other sort of physical markers that predict difficult intubation. But 3/4 or more of the difficult intubations that we see, which again are associated with bad outcomes, are not predicted on clinical grounds. And this is a study that suggests that AI would outperform conventional bedside tests just based on facial imaging. And you can see some of the images and sort of the outline of facial features that might predict difficult intubation, and an AI is going to be better than a human at doing all of that. And then the third example, which again is coming into practice, on that side, there's a lovely diagram, anatomical diagram of the neck. And you might not be able to see, but there's a needle coming through, and that is a depiction of doing a brachial plexus ultrasound guided nerve block. So to the right is an ultrasound image that will help us stick a large needle in your neck, and there's some important structures in there that you might not want to stick your needle into. Unfortunately, for practitioners who weren't trained on AI as youngsters, and I'm one of them, this is quite challenging. What we're going to see in the very near future is ultrasound-guided nerve block using devices like this, which I can stick into my iPhone. relatively simple device, packed with technology, but easy to use. And AI will give us real-time anatomical diagrams like the one at the top there that will make this a much safer procedure to do. So I'll put my ultrasound device aside and give you a couple more examples that come from other fields. So one is, that's an image to the left of a retina, the back of your eye. And many of you will know that one of the problems with diabetes for a long time is that you gradually go blind. So the technology is now very mature. So as of 2018, the FDA approved autonomous diagnosis of diabetic retinopathy. So unaided by a human, an AI can look at an image from the back of your eye and say, this is diabetic retinopathy that's beyond a particular grade of severity and warrants treatment because it's going to threaten your eyesight. Top there is a commercial vendor and there are a number of these now in the US charging $50 a pop to do this kind of screening for diabetic retinopathy. So, the theme for today is leveling up. So I think we should be thinking about ways that AI can help level up as opposed to, sink us further into further disparities in our healthcare system. CyberSight is part of a global charity called Orbis that has an AI that will do this. They talk about training Africa's next generation of eye doctors, and they're offering this for free in various pilot projects, including one they're trying to get started in South Africa. You do need a rather expensive camera to take the pictures. And there are issues with implementation, but the potential, I think, is huge. Here's a second example around breast cancer. So again, a non-radiologist with an ultrasound probe like this, connected to a phone, smartphone, plus AI, at the point of care is poised to revolutionize breast cancer therapy, perhaps, because in studies like the one I'm showing you here, point of care ultrasound plus AI versus standard of care ultrasound and AI, very highly accurate, diagnostically speaking. So lots of potential there. And there'll be the full range of these if you look around you coming onto the market to facilitate these kinds of interventions in the real world. Now, what about the stuff that Christoph was talking about earlier, generative AI? So ChatGPT is one, but you'll be aware that Bing, which is the Microsoft version of this, and Bard, which is Google's, and others are coming online. And if you buy into what Christoph was telling us, this is intelligent, capable, and even possibly more human than humans. So here's an example of that potential. This is a recently published study, December 22, where ChatGPT was actually able to pass the United States medical licensing exam. It didn't get full marks, but it's in the passing range. And as I said at the beginning, early stages, this is only going to become more capable. So does this represent a useful capability? Does this mean that ChatGPT is ready to be your general practitioner and become part of PPO Serve's panel? I'm not sure that that's fair to say just yet. Okay, so we've heard and seen a lot of the potential for fakery. And this slide is not meant to, sound the alarm bells, but we've seen the potential. And I think, when you see the evidence of this in terms of images that Christoph showed us, it's also in music. That's what these headlines are about. The Hollywood screenwriters are on strike because of worry about their jobs being taken by AI, and it's got a sense of humor. As you saw, it can write poetry, it can write screenplays. So the potential is enormous, and really it's about what is the system, the human system that we're putting all of this technology into, and can we get better outcomes from it? So okay, I'm not sounding the dystopian view, but it's there potentially. And really, I think the headline here is everything. This is going to permeate every aspect of healthcare, but I think that in our industry, it's got the great potential for good. So if we just, look at some of the circles in this, subcircles in the circle, robotics, there's a story there was a big story about a month ago about a quadriplegic literally able to work through an AI-based technology. So this is surface electrodes, or maybe even some brain-implanted electrodes, literally reading the neural pathways of a quadriplegic person and enabling, through a bypass of the damage in the spinal cord to the lower limbs, and enabling this individual to walk. So robotics and prosthetics that are incredibly sophisticated but are not going to arrive all of a sudden. We've already seen new drugs being discovered. What's the model there? I can't remember. The protein folding AI that's able to tell you, you've got a string of amino acids that's a protein, but what happens when it folds? What's the biological activity? So it's predicting all of that, and this is going to revolutionize potentially drug discovery. Precision medicine, is going to be built on lots of data from individuals. The idea that you can tailor an individual's treatment, whether it's drugs or other interventions, through having all of this knowledge about their genetics and other measurable biological aspects, is all going to come out of AI technology, which means more accurate, more precise, earlier diagnosis with great potential if used wisely. We know that there's a tremendous threat around health data being compromised by AI being put to the kinds of uses that we're afraid of, but equally well, AI can be used to protect data. The next epidemic, we've just had one, there's going to be others, and we need to be able to get ahead of those early, and we look at the data that's going to come through, and perhaps AI will help us anticipate and react to the next epidemic in a more sort of positive way than the last one. A couple more bullets there. Mental health. I think Christoph alluded to the idea that mental health and even therapy can be delivered through AI. And how people are going to respond to that, I'm not sure. My sister's a psychologist. She does all of her consultations now through telehealth, in a virtual way. And it's not a huge step to go from that perhaps to AI-aided or AI alone, and there's huge mental health burden in our population, so I think we're going to see lots going on there in the telemedicine space. Okay, so are we on the Gartner hype curve going up and about to see our expectations reach a more realistic level? Is a fair question. So we've seen this with other kinds of technology. So here's a more sobering view. So I'm old enough to have seen electronic health records come in. It's still coming into South Africa. We're still on that evolution. But in the US, where I used to live and work, EHRs offered huge promise. The United States government invested billions to make sure that every single doctor is using an electronic health record. Every hospital has one. But here's some of the results from a study of a group of different doctors from different specialties, finding that during the office day, they spent as little as 27% of their time directly interacting with patients, and as much as half of their time on EHR and desk work. And then even taking some of that work home every night, 1 to 2 hours a night. So that's not the kind of outcome I think we want from the introduction of a new technology. And how can we do this differently with AI? And can it actually free up time for face-to-face interaction, which I think most of us would want. And maybe some of us would just want an AI. I don't know. We're going to explore this, obviously, in the next few months and years. But is AI the solution to this particular problem? So this is just one company, quite well known, called Nuance, which happens to be owned by Microsoft, which can listen in to a doctor-patient consultation and actually create the structured note. So instead of the doctor typing away on a keyboard and with his attention focused on the technology rather than the patient, can the AI capture that interaction and produce the structured note with coding, which is what this industry lives on to an extent, on the back end, the medical schemes and so on. And the suggestion from this vendor is that time will be saved, 7 minutes per encounter, which is about half the documentation, that burnout and fatigue will go down, the documentation quality actually goes up at the same time, and that patients exposed to this find it more personable and actionable. So that would be great, wouldn't it? But in fact, of course, there are privacy concerns. Can you imagine, all of your personal data, this very, intimate interaction with your family physician or your psychiatrist, going up into the cloud and being processed? There's evidence that details are missed. This is not perfect, and details are added. Christoph didn't use the word hallucination, but that's what it is. ChatGPT will actually just make stuff up. And then ultimately, in the case of this particular vendor, the reality is that this captured transcribed note then goes off to an information professional in the US anyway for review and is returned to the physician for sign-off within 24 hours. And look at the cost. So $8,000 to $10,000 per doctor per year. That's not going to level up our healthcare system, is it? Okay, next point is evidence. Before we introduce anything, we'd like some evidence that it works, that it's safe, that it's effective. And here's just the traditional hierarchy of evidence. Most of you will have seen this before. It prioritizes randomized clinical trials at the top and systematic reviews, and it puts expert opinion down at the bottom, eminence-based medicine. So I think most of us would subscribe to the fact that we need this evidence, and the better quality evidence is what we want, that this actually works, it's safe and effective. I think there's one caveat around this, is that AI really, I think we can accept is a complex technology being introduced into a complex system. And that isn't always going to give us the right answer, number one. And number two, takes time, lots of cost to get the answers, the high quality evidence that we might want. And in the meantime, the world is moving on. ChatGPT got 100 million users within 2.5 months, I think. So there's a rapidly accelerating adoption of this technology, and clinical trials just take years and years to do. Okay, but here is an example of the machine learning, the applied AI being subjected to some sort of standard test of evidence. And in this case, this rather promising technology, we think, seems to fail. So in this randomized control trial, there was no difference in the control group in the total amount of hypotension that was experienced in this patient population undergoing surgery in general anesthesia. And in the results is this, that around half of the 1,500 alerts that the system produced were not followed by treatment. So why is that? It speaks to the idea that we need to really understand clinical care and what's going on and how people use the data at the front line of care. And here's another piece of evidence that suggests that this is not yet perfect by any means. ChatGPT failed this particular American test of competence, the American College of Gastroenterology self-assessment test. And the comment from the authors of this paper, we do not recommend its use for medical education in gastroenterology. They also said, same paper, same authors, that development of fine-tuned models specifically geared towards medical education can offer a potential solution to this issue. So I didn't include education in that circle of everything. I think that education is already being heavily impacted. Some negative ideas around people cheating on their tests, but I think the potential to be largely positive on the educational side exists. And some of that might be to do with just improvements of the technology. So this is a competing large language model being produced by Intel that's going to come online maybe in a year or so, they say, with even more parameters than ChatGPT, so more of those weightings that Christoph showed you. And second point is trained specifically on scientific and medical and other, bodies, body of information of science, whether it's healthcare or anything else. And then I think third final point about how we introduce this is that we need a learning system. So we need to use the data and we need to adapt over time and possibly start small. And this is just one model, one way of thinking about systems. And I bring it to you partly because just of its title, which is non-adoption or abandonment of technology, NAS, for scale-up, spread, and sustainability. So that's really what we want, scale-up, spread, and sustainability. And the name of this model betrays the fact that often these things fail when we put them into systems. And we need to have better ways of doing this, and continuous embedding and adaptation over time is the way to go. Okay, so when we have an incredibly powerful new technology, do we need regulation? Do we need certification to make sure it's safe and effective? The answer is, it has to be. So what's going on there? There's not enough time to explore that today, but maybe in question time we can think about this and talk about it. So these are comments in a book that I'd recommend called The AI Revolution in Medicine, partly because one of the authors is Peter Lee, and he's with Microsoft. So they've been early on this and been experiencing and working with it for quite some time. And the other author is Isaac Cohen. He's a physician, well-known sort of in the medical informatics space. And three things they're saying here. A GPT-4 is not a human being, as Christoph said. Might have sort of human capabilities or beyond. Might not be able to always understand or relate to the emotions, values, and contexts that affect human health and well-being. So it's, it's not inherently on our side. It can be aligned to our interests. But that's reason number one, to regulate and certify. Number two, since GPT-4 was trained on data from the internet, it has integrated biases into its neural net. And that's absolutely true. So whatever it's been reading, it incorporates that into what it puts out. And so we need to be really aware, particularly in sort of Africa, Asia, where the potential for those biases to be adverse in terms of how those technologies reflect our world, impact on our world, is greater than in North America or Europe. Third point, it has no formal certification or regulation to guide or constrain its use in medical scenarios. And as I've said already, it makes errors, it hallucinates, and in sometimes dangerous ways, so we should take care. And it's Sam Altman, we've heard about already, the CEO, young CEO of OpenAI, says this himself. And there's many of the leaders of AI and the developers and leaders of AI have come forward to issue warnings, saying that, and he said this in testimony to the United States Congress, that there should be a new government agency to license AI companies, that safety standards for AI models and to assess their level of danger should be instituted, that independent third-party experts should audit various aspects of AI products, and that this approach to regulation should be global, because it's going to be everywhere. It is already everywhere. Okay, so how do we proceed constructively? Perhaps the regulators will come in. We can talk in the break about what the EU is doing, which is further ahead than the United States. But here's some thoughts from Peter Lee that I really like. He's the VP of Healthcare for Microsoft. He says that, and Microsoft have been in this space for quite some time, not AI specifically, but healthcare, and trying to make an impact with, actually, I would say rather little to show for it up to now. He says that everyone has experience with healthcare, right? We all go to the doctor at some point, and therefore an opinion that goes with it. Many of us become dazzled by the potential for technology to solve problems, or we see problems that are already solved, or we think are already solved, and we can't understand why these shouldn't apply to healthcare. And we tend to ignore that there are conflicting ideas, perspectives, gaps and incentives. And what we get is what one might call techno-optimism, which is sort of a naive belief that technology can make the world better. And what he advocates is rather local optimization. That means avoiding the idea of a massive disruptive aim or transformational aim, and really just to understand the nature of healthcare and the work that's being done by frontline professionals and connect to their aims and really fundamentally try to improve their workflow. And to quote, to improve the day-to-day effectiveness and satisfaction of people delivering healthcare, which brings us back to the triangle that I started with patient and AI and HR, human intelligence, and sort of in the loop, as they say, humans in the loop. And I think this is, a lot of people are saying this, the experts, the people new to it, that humans need to continue to be in the loop. Autonomous diagnosis maybe some of the time, but humans in the loop of care. And when we think about our own healthcare system, back to the level up idea, that improvement of workflow doesn't have to be AI. So if I can just take a step away from the technology for a second. There are lots of opportunities to redesign work so that clinicians, particularly in the public sector, are freed up to do the work that they know how to do. And just remove the overhead, remove the burden, and that doesn't have to be AI. It can be much simpler, non-technological solutions to those kinds of problems. And then, if you want to characterize the impact or the way to apply the AI and other technologies, it's augmentation. So me with my, didn't learn ultrasound, want to learn how to use it to stick needles into the right places in people. I can be augmented by AI, and there's the potential for replacing certain tasks with machine intelligence. And then there are other things that are not going to be impacted at all, that are not language-based. And then this is my sort of take-home message, that techno-optimism, Barry is always pushing back at me for my dystopian perspectives on things often, justifiably. So can we have a new kind of techno-optimism, that's rooted in reality, that takes AI-powered technology to enhance processes, that enables a collaboration, and actually puts more care and even more love, can I say, into healthcare processes. So care and love to improve outcomes. And therefore, the technology is introduced into a system that is where we are really context aware, that we're in Kailicha or Dipslut or wherever, our contexts are very, very different. And so we need to be aware of that and have specific aims to focus on value, to learn as quickly as we can, to use improvement methodologies, and to make sure that it's ethical, safe, and well-regulated. I'll stop there. Thank you. I'll leave you with two thoughts as Siv comes back. One is a very optimistic view that says, from Eric Topol, who's a cardiologist, he says, AI is going to help us with errors and workloads or even curing cancer, but he's optimistic about the potential to restore connection and trust. And then to the right is the dystopian view that AI, it's not the rampaging robots necessarily, but how we use the technology could lead to really horrible effects on society broadly. Thanks.